Akbar, thank you so much for being on Conejo Valley Visionaries again. You are our first return guest,
Wow.
and I am thrilled to speak with you again, and even more pleased to be here in the city's TV studio. So thank you for having me.
You're very welcome, and welcome to our TOTV studio. This is where we run things during a city council meeting. It's actually the first time I recorded something in here, so
Okay.
It's kind of a first for both of us.
Yes, I love that. Well, we are here to talk about one of my favorite topics. I think one of yours too.
Yeah, I think it is mine too.
The Thousand Oaks Downtown Project. And for those of the listeners who are not aware of the project, they need to go and listen to our first conversation, which I will link to in the show notes. But I'm wondering if maybe you can give us, just at a very high level, like synopsis summary of what the project is before we dive into the updates since we last spoke and kind of where the project is now.
Sure. Well, if you didn't listen to the first episode, here's a 30-second high-level overview. It's essentially creating a downtown out of where we're sitting right now, the Civic Arts Plaza and City Hall at 2100 East Thousand Oaks Boulevard. It's a long-held desire to create a downtown space in the city of Thousand Oaks, something we don't quite have today. We have successful shopping centers in the way of the Oaks Mall or the Jan's Mall. But in terms of public spaces where people can congregate, bump into friends, with dining and shopping options, and where you can park once and leave your car and enjoy an afternoon, we really don't have that. And so there's a bit of, I'll say, intra-county envy around our neighbors, like Ventura, who has this successful downtown, historic downtown, Santa Paula. Even Camarillo managed to make a downtown out of a freeway frontage road.
I love that Main Street, frankly.
They've done a great job.
Yeah.
Hats off to them. So, I think this is our opportunity to create this downtown in the city of Thousand Oaks. Geographically, we're talking Thousand Oaks Boulevard between Herbs Road and Conejo School Road. So Herbs to the west, Conejo School Road to the east. If you encompass the acreage on both sides of the street of Teal Boulevard, that's roughly 100 acres. Which is really kind of the critical mass of what you need for a successful downtown.
Okay. It's one of the most common questions I receive. Where is this going to be? And I think, like, for some reason, contextually, people have a really hard time kind of imagining it. A lot of questions, are the lakes going to be part of this? Like, where is it? And I know we've got renderings that we'll be sharing and this, like, interesting flyover video, but would you say it's from Thousand Oaks Boulevard, like, so you said between Herbs and Conejo School.
Conejo School. Yeah.
Yes. And then from Thousand Oaks Boulevard towards the freeway.
Correct. That's just that's the south side of Teal Boulevard.
Yeah.
But of course, we want this project to be a catalyst for other reinvestment along the boulevard. So while we're primarily focused on the south side of Teal Boulevard, our hope is that one day the north side of Teal Boulevard also starts to follow suit. So
Okay.
We don't want to say we're just limited to this side of the street. We hope that over time, we start seeing some change on the other side.
But the build out will be within this section, and it'll be in front of the current, where we are right now.
Correct.
Current City Hall. And we'll talk through how those changes look. Can you answer the question, will the lakes be part of this?
So the Lakes has their own development plans going on.
Okay.
It's separate from the city investment. For the listeners who are unaware, Caruso Affiliated, who operates and owns the Lakes, they also have an entitled project in the parking lot to the tune of about 165 residential units. Okay. It's in kind of the back corner of the parking lot. That will generate some new foot traffic for the existing plaza. It's not part of our plans, but certainly it'll kind of flow and complement each other
Sure.
once they're both online.
So that helps from like setting the scene. So the last time we spoke, we went over kind of the structure of it. So it's intended to support our current performing arts center, as well as keeping the city hall and building around that. What are some of the major changes, though, that have happened since then that we can talk through?
So there were 5 that we presented to City Council. We've had several different concepts we've shown over the years, and I'll say since 2018, when the city council really embarked upon this in a more serious way with the downtown core master plan. We've had, I'll say, 5 different iterations, and within those iterations there have been sub-iterations. So I could probably pull out of the treasure trove, probably 15 different site plans along the way. But the 2024 site plan and the 2025 site plan had 5 key changes. The biggest of which was we were going to build a standalone city hall at the corner of what we're calling Main Street, just inset of Thousand Oaks Boulevard, and the intersection with Dallas Drive, which is currently the main entrance to City Hall in the parking structure. What we found out was, it was just cost prohibitive to build a new City Hall from the ground up. Second, when we really unpacked it, a commercial use like a hotel, hospitality use, was going to do far more, was going to have far more benefits for the entire program than a government use kind of anchoring the site. Mm-hmm. So the challenge for the design team became, well, how do we still create the necessary square footage for our city operation and then freeing up this potential building pad for something like a hotel? So that was kind of the big change. The second one was the public market used to be smack dab right in the center of that park area, which was great. I mean, it would have been kind of centrally located, but there were a few issues with that. One, it was undersized. As designed, it was about 7,500 square feet. It really needed to be on the order of minimally 12,000 square feet, so it was pretty grossly undersized. We learned that by talking with other public market operators. Second is when you have that many operators, they're getting deliveries and they're taking out garbage all hours of the day. When you put it in the middle of a park, there's no back door, right? Like there's nowhere to
it's not the best user experience for anybody.
Yeah, you don't want to be like eating a cheeseburger and then seeing trash with stuff dripping out of it, walking right next to you. So, not a great visitor experience, and that was an issue too. It's easier. There's a standalone restaurant there up against the boulevard, and you might be asking the question, like, well, how's the restaurant different than a public market? And the main difference being is it's one operator. They can better control delivery times, servicing times. When you have a public market, you have 8, 9, 10 operators all cohabitating the same space. You can't really time things as well as one would like. And then the third thing is during the community conversations that we held earlier this year, there was desire for a true town square. And we were looking around the program, and on this 20-acre site, we're like, oh, shoot. I mean, yeah, we have these park spaces kind of interwoven amongst the site, but there was no big gathering area, with the exception of the amphitheater that was kind of tucked away back there in the corner intentionally. So by moving that public market inside, we now freed up this beautiful park area that has been designed. Yeah. So that was number 2, realigning a box culvert, which is an underground stormwater conveyance for the non-civil engineers among us.
Okay.
Number 4 was, and you're going to stump me here.
I think it was actually number 5.
That was number 5?
Or you have one more left. Yeah. So we talked about there's going to be there's not a new city hall. You'll keep the freestanding or the one right now. Replace that with a hotel.
Correct.
We're going to move the market indoors.
Correct.
And it'll be larger, and that freed up the space for the town square, which you're saying is a town circle, right? It's like the shape
town
of
square
it.
that isn't square.
Yeah, it's the town square that's not square. Some civil engineering work that's going to be done.
Correct.
And then the last one.
The restaurant was one of the pieces.
Okay, great. So this freestanding restaurant that's on Teal Boulevard.
Correct.
Okay. Which of the changes are you most excited about, and which one have you found in the latest city council meeting did people seem the most excited about?
Great question. So the one that garnered the most attention, I'll answer the second question first. The one that garnered the most attention was the hotel component. My guess is because perhaps we led with the new city hall as kind of being that most prominent feature of the concept, and now we're replacing the most prominent feature. So it's like, wait, what happened here? Interestingly, the idea of a hotel has been part of the original concept dating back to 1987. There's this great artistic sketch that we show in part of nearly every presentation that shows a site plan from 87, and sure enough, right there in the middle, anchoring the site is a hotel. We did also include that as one of our land use goals with the general plan that was recently adopted in December of 2023. So the idea of introducing a hotel it was not new,
Yeah.
but in the previous concept, there was just no place for it to go. So we're like, well, that's a shame, but our hope is that maybe it materializes maybe on the other side of the boulevard or with one of our adjacent property owners. Now that we have the opportunity to do that, it made a heck of a lot of sense, just from the economic viability standpoint and also complementing our two theaters, as you said earlier. The one that I'm most excited about is the public market. That's going to be my favorite place in this whole area. I had a chance to live in downtown LA for a while, and I know this is not downtown Los Angeles, but pick your own version. I lived at First and Hope, right next to the Walt Disney Hall, in a tiny studio apartment. But one of my favorite things to do was Saturday and Sunday mornings was walk down the hill, down to Grand Central Market, and just the energy in there, the different variety of eateries, a mix of locals and tourists. It's just an awesome experience. It was a great way to just sit in front of G&B Coffee and just hang out and enjoy your coffee for an hour and a half and, do whatever you feel like doing. But it was a special place. And I think about what that can mean for Thousand Oaks, our version of it. And Santa Barbara has their own version of it. San Luis Obispo has their own version of it. But when I think about community spaces, those are the things that really excite me.
Yeah. Now, one of the comments I wrote down in my notes during the last city council meeting was this idea of like no Chili's and really like a focus on local and trying to, maybe amplify some of the local businesses here. Is that what you imagine with this market space?
Yeah, I think if there's a Chili's in there, something went wrong. No disrespect to Chili's. We have one in our city, of course.
Yeah.
There's a time and a place for Chili's. But in this public market, there was a strong desire from our community conversations that it be local business and or small business. So that's what we're going to try and focus on for that public market.
Yeah. And this question's come up. I think I've asked it in the first episode, but I don't know if there's any more clarity on this in terms of how can local businesses who are learning about this project now and maybe want to be a part of it. What do you have an idea of what that process might be like, or when should they be ready to sort of put their names in the hat?
Yeah, it's a great question. I haven't given that a whole lot of thought. We're still working through a lot of details, but here's what I'll say for now. We are still a year away from having an approved project. The actions the city council recently took was to say, hey, we're good with this design. Now go ahead and run it through the environmental process, and then we'll see it a year from now for actual approval. Once we get past that juncture in hopefully June of 2026, that's when we're going to be starting to engage, the different broker and commercial development community to see who's interested. In terms of the operators in the public market, the city will likely not have individual lease agreements with each operator. We don't want to be the kind of landlord that, has to maintain all these different agreements with, let's say there's a dozen different operators in there. We're just not set up to do that, and it's not our core expertise. What will likely happen is we will hire a master lease operator to then operate that public market. However, we will want to establish some criteria or maintain some curation control so that way there isn't the proverbial Chili's inside the public market. So we got to figure out what those guardrails are so that way we get the right mix of businesses in there that we and the community hope to see.
Okay. I love that. The other thing that there are a couple other things that really stood out to me during that last meeting. One was what I believe it was in the town square that's not a square, like kid play structures. I think that's a big part of the feedback I heard early on is the Conejo Valley, Thousand Oaks is such a family-centered area, and there's just really, although we have a lot of playgrounds around, but not somewhere where a parent can go enjoy an adult beverage and the kids can play. It seems like in the latest renderings, that's part of the design. There's a splash pad. There are some other things. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's the idea. I mean, we have beautiful parks. CRPD has done a great job of maintaining and adding inventory to our park system. What we're trying to create here is an entire family experience where mom or dad could be enjoying a beverage from that restaurant pad. Kid can be down there running amongst the splash pad. Just to the east of that splash pad is a children's playground. So we'll have both amenities there. Really, I'm not a parent yet, but soon, and I can imagine what I've been told by parents that have kids who run around and get into trouble is you want to have them within eyesight.
Yeah.
So the idea that you can sit down and kind of supervise from afar is a really nice thing to have. So that's our goal, is to create a space that can be family friendly, and it can evolve over the course of a day, right? So that's kind of your daytime experience or your afternoon experience. And then in the evening, it starts to, the vibe starts to shift, and that's what good downtowns do, is they evolve throughout the course of a day.
Yeah. And you had, in the hotel, we didn't talk about this, but if I remember correctly too, there's a hotel, like a rooftop bar, is that right? And then
yeah, as currently designed.
Yes, as currently designed.
Yeah, as currently designed, and we want to try and maintain that as part of the design, of course. But yes, there is a rooftop and bar / there's probably going to be food service up there too.
Yep.
Our expectation is that be open to the public, for any member of the public to come up there and dine, and not just for the hotel guests. So it's available to both visitors and our residents. But yes, that would have some, as you might imagine, some incredible views of the Conejo Valley and the hillsides to the north.
Yeah. There was also a mention about art, and in the renderings you see some outdoor art sculptures.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, renderings are. I love seeing renderings because they just they usually have some funny little Easter eggs and things in them. But is that art part of this bigger plan to really incorporate that more?
Absolutely. What you see in the renderings, we call it placeholder art.
Yeah.
So we slap some murals places, some statues places, some artistic shade structures in a couple places, and again, that's meant to be illustrative of, hey, here's where art can go. Look at all the places art can live. Absolutely. So one thing that we found out early on in this design process was that culture was going to be our economic driver for this project. So when you think about back to school shopping, just getting a new pair of shoes, like, this is probably not the place to come do that. If you want to go do that stuff, the Oaks Mall, the Jans Mall are going to be far better options for you to get that stuff done. However, if you want to experience the performing arts, the visual arts, the culinary arts, you want to bump into friends and neighbors, this is the place to be. So without art, we're going to have a tough time making this successful. So I think there's a recognition that arts needs to be a core component of it.
This is art related, but there's going to be a library outpost is also part of the current plan, which I love, and I think for kids too, that's really cool. Is that something that was a new ad? Is that right?
That was a late addition,
okay,
and that was made possible by some kind of reconfiguration of the spaces. To set expectations, we're not talking about the Grant Brimhall Library or the Newbury Park Branch Library. Those are rather large, community serving libraries. This library outpost, and outposts should be underscored here, fairly small, a few thousand square feet, but really it becomes a landing spot for anyone that wants to access library services. It's also recognition that this is going to be a neighborhood. And we talk about downtowns. Downtowns typically have residents. And so we did a library master plan in the summer of 2023. They looked at where our libraries are currently positioned. One of the things they recommended was introducing some form of a library in the central part of Thousand Oaks, which this is. And so this is our way of accomplishing that goal. But then also we looked at how it could complement the rest of the program.
Yeah.
I was talking with our city librarian, and I asked him, I said, Darren, how many people do we typically get for a children's story time? And I'm thinking, like, can they fit in that 2,500 square feet? I'm trying to do the math. He's like, oh, well, I'm expecting the number to be like 25.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, we can get somewhere between 80 and 120 people.
Yeah.
I'm sure you with kids maybe.
Of course, no,
you
the
experience that,
turnouts
right?
are amazing.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the events and the activities that they run, and they are very well received, it seemingly.
Yeah. So I was a bit shocked when I heard that, and this again, ignorance of a non-parent, but I'm like, well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then I started to think, I'm like, well, that 2,000 or 3,000 square feet is not going to be nearly large enough. And it's not just that there's 120 kids. There's maybe 40 or 50 kids, but then there's mom and or dad.
Yeah.
And so you end up having both adults and kids. And I was like, all right, so the question then becomes, how do we leverage the other parts of the program to still do children's story time when you have 120 or 150 people show up? And that's where in the program, the Library Outpost shares a lobby area with this, it used to be called the Black Box Theater, we call it the multi-use venue, which can seat 120, 130 people. So if you want to go do story time, you can kind of open your doors to the lobby. This is where your library staff is, and then hold story time in the Black Box Theater, because while you might have had comedy and jazz night, on Saturday night, the night before, it's empty at 10 a.m. And so we talk about downtowns taking on, different life or the arc of the day. That's another example.
And that will be a new space, new
Correct.
performing arts space.
Correct. So it'll be the third.
Yeah.
We have two today,
Yeah.
and this will be the third.
Well, I think it's an interesting kind of perspective to give it that you mentioned, that this is the driver's culture. And it sounds like that's, what all the elements will be centered around, less about commerce, more about how do we continue to use this as a hub for the culture in the area. And I think that kind of can help, a listener kind of reset or frame the idea of the project. Would that be right?
Yeah. It's what people should think about when they think about downtown.
Yeah.
Which is, you think about downtown Santa Barbara, downtown SLO, downtown Ventura, like that's the nucleus of that community's culture, is in those spaces. We want that to be true of here too.
So one question we got a lot about was the mixed-use residential spaces.
Sure.
There's a lot of them going in. What do you, one thing we talked about was that when this will be open, and we'll talk about timeline in a minute, how will people want to be living? Is it studio apartments? It's 6 years, 8 years out, what will that look like? Do you see that there is this desire for people to be living in apartment spaces out here, or is it just a way to allow more people to live in Thousand Oaks?
Probably both.
Yeah.
I think the downtown will probably attract both types. There's certainly the kind of person that wants to be in a walkable community where they're not so car dependent just to do the basic tasks. But we already know that there's demand for it, because we see what rents are going for today. When you look at quality product that's now online, we really only have, I think, two examples with 1710 just down the street and 299. Those are nice products, of course, but the demand is clearly there. And this now gets into more of housing policy. I won't go too far in depth, but one of the goals of the city council and really the state in general has been, how do we add supply to kind of rebalance the the housing stock. So we have 2,000 entitled units citywide, by the way. 2,000, I'll say mixed, not mixed use, but multifamily units entitled.
Okay.
When you think of other projects like IMT, which is off Hampshire Road, the old Kmart site we refer to it as.
I moved after the Kmart was there, but I hear about that space.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So you can drive by it. It'll be, I think they're kind of resuming construction here in the next few weeks, which is great news. But that's 400 units, and then Newbury Park out near Amgen, a former City Hall site at 2150 Hillcrest. That has another 330 units. 500 Thousand Oaks Boulevard, which is where the old pumpkin patch and Christmas tree lot is.
Sure.
That has roughly, I believe, another 300 units. So all over the city, there's this pent up approved units that will be coming online, and the downtown will hopefully be part of that class of construction.
Yeah. Before we go into the community questions, I'm just curious, in your role, in the first episode, we talked about sort of your journey here. And I'm curious, as the person sort of spearheading this project in its current iteration, and and having to navigate, you said, so many different versions of this project and community feedback, which I think you've done a really great job of taking in and considering. What has been the biggest challenge in this, where you are right now and overseeing this project?
I think I've been fortunate in so many ways that I showed up here and there was already this energy and this motivation to want to pursue this project. It wasn't like I had to show up and then start to convince everybody, like, hey, let's go do this thing. No, a lot of it kind of predated my arrival. Now, this is my second tour of duty with the city of Thousand Oaks, so returning to the city. But the biggest challenge, I think, is something that I think has been going on for a while, which is trying to communicate with members of our community that, yes, we're adding housing here to accomplish our housing goals, but it's also what's going to make this downtown economically viable. And on top of that, the introduction of housing on this space is not going to diminish your resident experience. And so being able to engage in those conversations respectfully, that can prove challenging at times, but I think generally people, they want to be heard, and when you engage them sincerely, they're generally okay, even if they may still disagree.
Yeah. On the flip side, what are you most proud of?
The community engagement piece. I believe it was Danielle Borgia she's the president of the Greater Conejo Valley Chamber of Commerce. She had made a comment saying that she was talking with somebody and someone had mentioned how much the project has changed from what we originally conceived versus what the city council considered just 2 weeks ago. And I loved her comment. She said, that's a good thing. And I would agree with her. That is a good thing. That means that we're listening to the community on what they want. Those 5 changes we talked about, more than a couple of them were the result of community feedback we got in January and February of this year. And then it also shows that we're listening to the experts. It's not just that we had this defined, set in stone game plan in mind and, to heck with the experts, we're going to march ahead and do it. Yeah. We heard from, economic consultants, retail consultants, telling us, hey, you may want to reconsider this or retool that. And that's the project you see today.
Yeah. And I think when it applies to more of a potentially like an entrepreneur or somebody who's working in the private sector, this idea, you in effect are a project manager. Would you liken that in terms of like trying to work with all the stakeholders to ensure buy-in, plus bringing in resources and consultants who can help guide you? And I think that that's something that I've noticed that's pretty consistent, is how do you bring in these expert voices that you're not going to know everything, but how do you do that to help move a project forward?
Yeah, so I'm by no means a construction management professional,
right.
To be clear. At this juncture, we're pretty far away from, construction management, right? It's really about quarterbacking the...
I suppose I meant like idea project management. I mean, that's a big idea.
Yes.
It's a big project, not in terms of the actual construction, but taking something that feels like at a 30,000 view is a gigantic thing to bring to life, and still is, that it requires a lot of, I don't know, I imagine navigation to pull it forward.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, there's really a few different groups you have to honor as you go about a project like this, right? So you have to honor the history. There was work that was done, before me. The different iterations I mentioned dating back to 1987 all the way to 2022. And so you have to honor the work that was done before. You have to also kind of put a critical eye on it too. Were we making the right decisions when we decided that should go there? So there's that piece. Then there's the most important piece, which is the community input piece, and knowing that there are different, there are different opinions depending on which group you speak to. Even in the 5 community conversations that we held, we heard different opinions within the same session, and even more different opinions depending on the different sessions you attended. And then the third tranche is your experts, like we talked about, is making sure you're still leaving some flexibility to where this thing has to get built. It still needs to economically stand on its own 2 feet. So you have to marry all that together. And then on top of that, there's the will of the council, which again, as a representation of the community at large. But we had 2 city council members that were part of this ad hoc committee, and you may have heard me talk about the ad hoc committee at the previous council meetings. It's 2 out of our 5 city council members that sit on it. Al Adam and Mikey Taylor, our mayor pro tem. And, Mikey had talked at our last council meeting about how much this means to him as well as someone who grew up here and is now raising his family here.
Yeah. So speaking of moving this all forward, what is the current timeline?
So
when are we going to be enjoying the splash pad?
It's going to be a little while. But things like this don't materialize overnight, of course. So we're sitting here in 2025. I mentioned we're about a year out from having an approved project in June of 2026. I imagine at the earliest we would start moving dirt around in second half of 2027. There's different components of the project, but we may see the first pieces of it be completed sometime on the order of 2030. And the reason why I can't commit right now as to which pieces is a lot of that depends on our funding strategy. Okay. So, the City Hall piece, may take the longest to materialize. I could see that going into 2032. Again, it just depends on funding availability and, if all the stars align. And the current rate environment from an interest rate perspective. So a lot of variables out there. But that's our hope. That's our timeline there.
Speaking of funding, people want to know, will our taxes be going up to pay for this? How is it going to be funded?
Yeah, good question. So we are not issuing a general obligation bond, so you won't see a line item on your property tax. You won't see an increase in your sales tax when you go to buy a new car or you go to check out at the grocery store. None of that. The way we're funding this is we've been talking about how long we've been talking about this, right? Since 2018. And smartly, the city council started kind of stashing away funds to slowly grow that nest egg. And that nest egg is up to about $45 million. So smart on the council, smart on, and staff are following through to just slowly build up that nest egg. So we can actually conduct the first phase of this entirely cash funded, which is great. The balance of it would come from lease revenue bonds, which is a financing mechanism where we essentially look at the long-term lease revenues from the spaces that we're creating and then create an upfront cash payment to fund the construction of it. And then a variety of different funding mechanisms that remain to be seen. We know some will materialize in the name of naming rights here and there, tastefully. And then also, you may have heard us talk about tax increment financing, which is a new tool that's available to us. We'll be talking to our fellow taxing entities to see if they want to participate. But in the 15-second version, it locks in property taxes for a defined area, like Conejo School to Herbs Road. And then the property taxes rise from there, but we can borrow against that delta and use that to make upfront investments. So it doesn't raise property taxes for the general public.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to hear.
Yep.
Can you talk about landscaping? This was something that at one of the community conversations, it sounds like there was maybe a movement towards more kind of using local agricultural, local plants to sort of build out the space. Maybe in the newer renderings, they look a little bit more hardscaped. Were there changes in that plan, or it looks like the oaks, rightfully so, are kind of the main showpiece in all of this. But how do you think about that?
So you're right. The oaks are the main showpiece. I mean, that's what we're highlighting here. I've learned a lot about oaks throughout this process. One of the questions I asked in the renderings was like, why aren't these beautiful, colorful flowers at the base of these oaks? Wouldn't that look great? And the landscape architects were quick to admonish me. They're like, you can't irrigate plants next to oaks. They don't. It doesn't work. You can put potted plants. But what we heard from the community conversations were a strong desire for native, low water use with some, color and playfulness in there. But the main priority was native. So we're prioritizing native. Now, with respect to the hardscape versus softscape, Herein lies the challenge.
Yeah.
So, one, we heard loud and clear when we mentioned the farmers market that pulled really, really well. By health code, to have a farmers market, it needs to have hardscape for perishable items. So we're like, okay, well then how do we balance the softscape with the hardscape? We know we need to have that. Second, we heard a desire for DG paths, or decomposed granite, which is like those dirt paths you see in some areas of town along Westlake Boulevard or in Dos Vientos, right?
Yeah.
And they're great for walkers and joggers, runners. But we heard from our last session on the accessibility that please don't do that. Because when you have irrigation nearby, or when you have a rain, even a light rain, if you're in a wheelchair or if you use a walker, that now becomes rather impassable. So when I talked about different opinions, that's one example.
Yeah, sure.
And when I look at the site plan and I read some comments, social media got the best of me, and they're like, I wish we would see more softscape, maybe some more grass or native plantings here and there. It looks like a lot of concrete in places. What we're trying to do is balance all the different objectives with respect to the project.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge, and I don't have the luxury of having this conversation with 200 different people, but this is my way of doing it, right?
Of course, no.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we got to ask these questions, because we did receive a lot of them. And, as I've mentioned, I'm very pro the project because I feel like there is a value in having a downtown, but I'm not sure that I'm going to agree with all the decisions, but it's good to hear. I think it's important to share with listeners, with the community members, the why behind it, because maybe they're not considering it. And it does seem as though the team behind it has been considering and had to kind of take all these different goals and objectives in mind, and ultimately hopefully will be the best version of it, considering all of that.
And one last point on the hardscape, softscape thing. We're at the 30% design level, which is typically when you put pencils down, you go before the land use body, you get your approval, and then you invest in the 30% to 100%. So, it's not like we're done and it's fully baked. When it comes to items like hardscape versus softscape, we can still make adjustments. And so if we're hearing throughout the entitlement that, hey, we'd love to see more softscape, I imagine this design team will find places in the program to introduce it that don't reduce the amount of pop-up tents that we can have for farmers market and street fairs, that also don't create an issue for people with accessibility issues. Yep. So little token that I want to just leave behind. So
yes, and we'll ask about how the community can still be involved. I suppose maybe the most controversial feedback that I got, and I'm relatively new to the Conejo Valley and never lived in the San Fernando Valley, is making comparisons to the design to something of the San Fernando Valley. Now, I'm curious, you're from Thousand Oaks originally, you've lived here for a long time. Why do you think people are maybe making that comparison, and how would you maybe assuage those fears or speak to them?
It's probably been the longest standing concern in the city's history, right? And I get it. It's why a lot of residents moved here in the first place, and they started their families here because they wanted to, not be in that environment. They wanted to be here. And so we want to preserve that quality of life. They moved here for quality of life. There's a variety of reasons why that just won't be the case here. I'll start with the obvious one, is that the sheer population of the San Fernando Valley is, I forget the population, but it is in the 7 figures, not the 6 figures. We're barely cracking 130,000. In fact, our population is declining, not growing. So first off is that. Second, in terms of the aesthetics of this project, we are setting a bar for quality that I'll say I can't think of a project in the San Fernando Valley that has achieved this. This design team I'm incredibly proud of. We had a local firm in RRM Design. They're headquartered out of San Luis Obispo, but the local office here in Ventura is the one who spearheaded this project. And they brought in, as part of their partners, Smith Group Architects, and together they went gangbusters, and they have designed, I think, an incredibly attractive project. our job is to make sure that when we select the right development partner, that we hold the bar on quality. So, so I think maybe the second piece of this might be they see certain buildings in the San Fernando Valley and they think, well, I don't want it to look like that. And I don't want to pick on any particular project, but we've all seen them. This will not look like that. These are beautiful projects, beautiful buildings, and we want to make sure that we hold the line on that. Third is we're incredibly intentional about where this is going. The general plan I mentioned earlier that got adopted in December of 2023, that was a 4-year effort to, if your audience is not familiar with general plans, it's essentially the Magna Carta of what goes where in the world of zoning, or what uses go where, industrial, commercial, residential, et cetera, mixed use. Where the land use map allows for mixed use is along areas where it makes sense. Teal Boulevard, Hillcrest, Newberry Road, main arterial corridors that can sustain that kind of development. Mm-hmm. And again, without critiquing the valley too much, I think some of these developments pop up in areas that you're kind of scratching your head and you're wondering, well, how's this going to connect to other services? And it feels like you need to hop in your car just to go get a gallon of milk, and so that's another key differentiator. And the last one, we're a city of about 55 square miles. That's, if you do the math, that's about 32,000 acres. If you recalled earlier, I mentioned this is 100 acres. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do the math in my head. That's 1/3 of 1%. I mean, it's of our overall land mass. That's pretty low.
Yes. So the impact on the overall landscape.
Yeah, the impact is pretty minimal. And not to mention, if people are concerned about, we've heard another concern around height of either the hotel or some of the mixed-use buildings. There's not a single structure that we are proposing that comes anywhere near what the Kavli, the height of that.
Yeah.
It rises pretty tall. In fact, the buildings all are pretty much in line with the height of the existing parking garage. And one of our design goals, of course, from the very beginning has been, how do we screen that ugly mass of concrete from the boulevard? And one way of doing that is putting beautiful buildings in front of it. So I could probably go on longer, but I think that I'll leave it there for now. There's just so many reasons why this is just not going to be that experience, and I hope that in time we can demonstrate that.
The other last question I had, not the last question, but the other thought, as you were speaking about the design, we didn't mention that sort of the overall aesthetic is a mid-century modern design look and feel. Is that right?
That's right. Okay. Yeah, of varying degrees, but that's kind of,
okay.
You'll see elements of that sprinkled throughout.
Yeah, fantastic. So speaking of community engagement questions, is there still an opportunity for people to share that with you, with the ad hoc team? How would one best give you some comments about it, positive or constructive?
Yes, thank you for asking. So our communications team, they're going to be creating on the project's webpage, toaks.gov/downtown, kind of a feedback forum. So if you watch the flyovers and you're like, hey, have you thought about this or that, there will be an opportunity to write something in there and submit that to me, and then we will respond. We read them, so it's not like they go into a black box that's never to be seen again. I mentioned we're still a year away from entitlement, so really it's the big moves that need to stop moving, where the buildings sit, that needs to stay in place, so that way we can have a project description and we can evaluate things from an environmental perspective. But there are still plenty of things that we're going to need to figure out between that 30% design mark and that 100% design mark. And so we're going to need ongoing community feedback to see, what about the finer details? We've had a couple of inquiries recently about, what's going to live in the public market? What's going to be sold there?
Right.
And I may not have all the details right now, but the fact that people are thinking about this tells me they're starting to get excited and they're thinking about it.
Awesome. Well, this has been really helpful. Thank you for the update. Exciting, to see that the project continue to move along, and wishing all the luck in the next year for the approvals on it. We keep it going because I know there is an excitement once people hear about it, and to be a part of it, hopefully, and as early as 2030 and have our kids play and have us be able to enjoy the space will be really exciting. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I encourage everybody, attend a city council meeting, go to the website, leave your feedback once it's up. My experience so far has been that you guys are really taking into account and listening, and I think that means a lot.
Thanks, Cristina. Appreciate the time today.
Of course.